Okay, the time is now 2 p.m., so I will call the Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 regular council meeting to order. And I will begin with a land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located within Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis, and we acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. It is because of our treaty relationship that we can now live, work, and play on Treaty 6 territory. So with this, the first item that we have is a consent agenda. If council wants, we can move consent on number 3, the minutes, and the budget schedule. Councillor Abatoye?
Yeah, I will make a motion that council approves the following agenda items. Approval of minutes of February 28th, 2023 regular council meeting. And item 7.1, schedule regular council meeting dates and time for the 2024 budgets as presented.
Okay, thank you very much. So I do have to check to see if any members of council wish to have any of these broken out separately. And if not, I will go to close. I'm not seeing any, nothing on close. I'm going to close the motion. Please cast your vote. Is mine coming? No. I'll have to go out and come back in again. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Just give me 1 second so I'm not trying to multitask here. Okay, we'll give that a try. Okay, so at this point in time, we have 3 individuals who have registered as delegations, and these individuals have gone through the Legislative Service Office. They will each be allowed 5 minutes to speak on the topic that they have registered for. At the end of the 5 minutes, if council has any questions of them, they will have that opportunity to ask questions. At no point in time does council get into discussion or debate or answering questions of members of the public as they do their presentations, just so that we're very clear about what the process is. So with that, the first one is Wilma Ferguson, if you would like to come forward. And you will have 5 minutes, and Ms. Exley will set a timer for you. And I understand you have registered to speak on the land use bylaw or municipal development plan? Okay. All right. So Ms. Exley will set the timer. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Wilma Ferguson. I am a resident of Fort Saskatchewan. I have a master's degree in leadership, so I'm very interested in what is happening here in Fort Saskatchewan. My presentation is called Planting Seeds, Seeds of Doubt. I hope you hear what I have to say and the questions I have regarding the municipal plan for Fort Saskatchewan. May you think long and hard about the direction this plan is taking the citizens and especially the children. Will this be a digital prison that you want your children and grandchildren to grow up in? This prison could be a result of your actions. I was told by a city employee that Fort Saskatchewan will not be a 15-minute city. However, I have discovered that you have received funding to become a smart city. In my assessment, these are one and the same. Ways of controlling citizens using cameras and reporting devices. SMART stands for surveillance, monitoring, analysis, reporting technology. I don't recall giving my permission to have you monitor my movements. Now I want to turn to your plan. You've used 3 companies to develop this plan. Who paid for these services? Did you realize that the owner of MVH is a graduate of Harvard University School of Design? Klaus Schwab has recruited many of his soldiers from this institution. This could be another one. Is that what we want in our city? And do we have any city employees who are affiliated with WHO, WEF, or city? Plan pillars are mentioned in the introduction of your plan. This is a term that comes from the UN. With the UN being funded largely by China and Bill Gates, I feel strongly that we should not be having any of this in our city. Explain what you mean by changing climate. What research is this based on? Could you please share that research with me? This is another UN idea to make us compliant with their green agenda. Why do we have to support Edmonton? Have you read the document that is being shared with the public regarding the plans for Edmonton and the 15-minute cities? It even goes into how much meat people will be allowed to consume by the year 2020, which is 0. This is something we should not be associated with. On page 9, under strategy, it says the ability to meet residents' daily needs within a short drive. Do you mean we will be limited as to how far we can drive, or you expect us to give up our vehicles altogether? Is this something you should be doing? Page 9, under growth strategy, you mentioned extreme weather. Where is the research to indicate we will experience extreme weather? Why don't you just stop the geoengineering and the spraying of our skies? You should also be investigating the heart fields out in Redwater. Page 9, you talk about global trends. What global trends? And who says these are global trends? Please share your research on these trends. Is this also coming from the UN? You mentioned heart disease and death. Do you realize that most heart problems these days are directly related to the COVID jab? How will walking trails help these people? Page 9, could you please explain infrastructure efficiencies? And why do we need pharmaceutical companies here? These companies have caused so many deaths and injuries with the COVID jab that we should never allow these companies in Alberta. We need to seek out natural ways to control and cure diseases. Page 13, what does intensification, size, and development efficiencies mean? Page 17, emergency preparedness is mentioned. I don't know anything about that, and I live in this community. Page 26 mentions 880 cities. Where does this concept come from? Does this mean we will not own vehicles? Is this something a city council should be determining for their citizens? Is this yet another UN idea? And page 35, what does infill residential projects mean? What is a complete street? Your plan talks about healthy cities. How do you expect people to walk or ride their bikes in minus 15 or lower degree weather? Have you considered the idea of using space within the city to grow food that could feed the families who can no longer afford to buy food? And with a shrinking food supply, this may become a necessity. Air quality. I want to know where geoengineering fits into this and how you plan to stop it. I encourage those of you who question the direction this council is taking to stand up and be brave and simply say no. Let's take down those 5G towers, say no to digital anything, take down those gates in the stores, and let's make Fort Saskatchewan a place where kids can thrive. Let's not take away their freedoms. Let's see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and elemental spiritual forces of the world, rather than on Christ. Thank you for your time. I would like to see answers to my questions before the next council meeting, and may God guide your actions.
Okay, thank you very much. I will just ask if council has any questions of Ms. Ferguson. There doesn't appear to be any questions, so thank you very much. The next person who has registered is Jody Levitt. And once again, you will have 5 minutes, and I understand it's regarding the MDP and land use bylaw. Okay, I'll just have you push your button, and you have 5 minutes, and Ms. Whoops, just push it again.
I was never really interested in politics until I came to understand that politics dictate the quality of our lives. Hence why it's so important that we are able to trust those that we have elected to do what's in the best interest of those that have elected them. This has never been more prevalent than it is right now, seeing what our federal government is doing. But I don't have time to talk about that today. Today I want to talk about smart cities, 5G, what a HARP field is, and the WEF's agenda. We are being told it's all for the betterment of humanity and taking care of our environment under the guise of climate change. Finding the information on the government websites, then deciphering what it all means is another job in itself, a job that most people don't want to do or have time for. For something that is going to change the way society functions in such a drastic way, I'm wondering why there was never a referendum put forth to the people. For something that is going to, the information that I've found on the efforts taken to inform the residents of Fort Saskatchewan were weak at best and very untimely. Only 3.3% of the population engaged, and unfortunately I couldn't find any information on what side they were leaning, nor could I find what the ads on the radio actually said to inform the residents. At this time, the HARP field west of Redwater was being erected. I was also unable to find any information on how or if the residents were in proximity were informed about what a HARP field is and what it might mean to their lives. We have smartphones, smart cars, smart appliances, smart homes, smart neighborhoods, and now smart cities. Are we being monitored 24/7? Who else is monitored 24/7? Prisoners, that's who. Our information is being collected to give to whom and for what purpose? Essentially, we are living in a digital prison that we are unknowingly paying to stay in, that was built using our tax dollars. I've had plenty of time to educate myself on what's 5G, smart cities, and what HARP fields are, and all that is going on around the globe. The best part about AI is that it sets an algorithm so that you get more of the same information. The bad thing about it is that it limits our information and stops the expansion of knowledge. In the wrong hands, AI can be very dangerous. It can control what you see and program behavior. Very soon, we will be having digital IDs, digital money that control and track everything we do, how we spend our money. It's all in the best interest to slow down our carbon footprint, right? If we go over the limits set by the powers that be, will we be fined or punished in some way? All of these smart technologies are transferring the information on these 5G frequencies that are detrimental to our health and well-being. Frequency, energy, and vibration are the very fiber of our existence. The 5G frequencies are disrupting the biosynchronization of our natural rhythms of the universe. This will ultimately exceed any damage or our so-called footprint could ever do. I'm reminded of our 5th grade science lesson on how important carbon is in sustaining the lives of trees, plants, and even ourselves. So to me, having a zero carbon emissions environment makes absolutely no sense. There is indeed climate change, but it is not caused by what we are being told. It is being created by these HARP fields, which are also emitting these frequencies. HARP fields are used to control the weather along with chemicals that are being sprayed in our skies. Only now they are referred to as geoengineering to make it sound better. Yes, they have been controlling the weather for the last 60 years. You can find that on the government websites. If you look into the government's reasoning behind the chemtrails, they will tell you that it is to protect us from the sun, another vital part of sustaining life on planet Earth. Klaus Schwab and the WEF's Agenda 2021 and 2030 have spoken openly about their agenda on transhumanism and depopulation. These are now becoming a reality and no longer conspiracy. We are traveling at a great speed in the direction that we will ultimately destroy humanity and this planet. I'm here today to tell you I do not consent.
Okay, you're finished. Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you. Are there any questions of council to Ms. Levitt? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. And the third person who is registered is Grace Stelmeschuk. And I understand it's regarding the MDP and land use bylaw. And I'd kind of like to remind our presenters that it should be, as the first one, referencing each document. So you will have 5 minutes. Is this on? Yes. Okay.
My name is Grace Stalmaschuk. I think all residents of Fort Saskatchewan deserve answers regarding the Municipal Development Plan Bylaw number C31-20. Who has deemed it necessary to change the current overlay of Fort Saskatchewan? Who is so bothered by these well-established neighborhoods that they feel it is necessary to revamp them? How will this impact residents of 40-plus years in any of these neighborhoods? What will this be costing our residents? Where is the funding coming from? There is a reference in the MDP to foreign investment. From who? From where? What risk is that to us? Why would foreign investors care about Fort Saskatchewan? Consulting companies. Did our residents at any time request that 3 consulting companies be hired to write up a municipal development plan telling us how wonderful it is all going to be for us? It looks wonderful on paper and sounds like the best thing until it isn't. Were our residents consulted and did they vote for any part of the MDP? How much are we paying for this service? What connection do they have to the people of Fort Saskatchewan? When I read a document with terms such as clusters, plan pillars, nodes, street-oriented, 880 cities, forward-thinking, eyes on the street, and especially natural surveillance, I can't help but wonder how good or bad this is going to be for our young families, grandchildren, and future generations. In the MDP, there are 2 separate statements to the effect that Fort Saskatchewan supports and is part of the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Growth Plan. Why? What connection do they have to the people of Fort Saskatchewan? Is the EMR paying for our upcoming development plans, or are we residents paying for this? If the latter is the case, how much is it costing? Established neighborhoods. It bothers somebody that population is decreasing. Why? Will we be shoved out of our areas to accommodate high-density housing? We don't want any interference. We just want to be able to live in these areas in peace. Walkable neighborhoods is referred to multiple times in the MDP. Do we not already have walkable neighborhoods in our city? How much more walkable can they be? At what cost to us? We cannot afford more money being taken out of our pockets. You expect us to walk everywhere in the ruse of climate change, however the globalists jet set all around the world. By allowing the infiltration of a smart city, an 880 city is referenced on page 24 into our precious city. Do you feel this is in the best interests of our residents, or are outside forces dictating that it is? Have our residents been consulted as to their opinions regarding being a smart city with nodes throughout their city? Are residents aware that eventually this will involve and include digital ID that will be tied to their every movement, to healthcare, financial services, food supply, travel, and more, every aspect of their lives? We are not willing to be pinned, cataloged, categorized, tracked, and controlled. I am respectfully requesting that we all stand up and say no for all of Fort Saskatchewan. Fort Saskatchewan residents deserve to be well informed about land use bylaw changes. I would respectfully suggest that notifications be sent out to every household. Not everyone is on social media and not everybody reads the record. Alberta Report of January 27, 2023, Carmen Kissel-Verrier, a published author from Edmonton, said, quote, she believes Edmonton's notifications about the 15-Minute Cities program are vague and do not provide a balanced view of this controversial program, end quote. I feel it is vague in Fort Saskatchewan also. Verrier says, after closely watching residents in Oxford in the UK who is testing this concept now, we are learning that their municipal governments are readily moving the goalposts on the freedom to leave their 15-minute city. What was once first advertised as the freedom to leave their area with their car up to 100 times per year has now changed to lower set points and without notice to residents. They are often subsequently fined when leaving their zone because they work in another area. Is this what's coming to Fort Saskatchewan? Edmonton Sun, March 11, 2023, Jamil Javani states, if you are a Canadian who is concerned about the direction of our country, my hope is that you will know that you are not alone. The same applies for people of Fort Saskatchewan. You are not alone. Say no to this ridiculousness. SMART in smart cities is surveillance, monitoring, analysis, reporting technology. Some food for thought. Are the new cameras recently erected throughout our city part of this? Thank you for taking time to listen to my concerns.
Okay, thank you very much for coming out. I'll just ask council if anybody has any questions. And I'll just thank everybody for coming out, and hopefully they attend any of the public engagement sessions where questions can be answered. All right, thank you. So we will move right along with our agenda. So the first item, next item is Realtors Association of Edmonton update to council. So we have Rahim Jamani and Melissa Saritsky. So if you'd like to come up. And you have about 15 minutes and then any questions. So welcome. You can just push your button. There we
go. Good afternoon, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for making the time for us to be able to present to you today. As mentioned, my name is Rahim Jamani, and I'm here with Melissa Saretsky. We both represent the Realtors Association of Edmonton and area, so we go from all the way from San Guido all the way up to Cold Lake. Melissa is also a resident here within the Fort Saskatchewan and represents her clients, community and neighbors within this area. Our association represents about 4,500 members and the tens of thousands of clients that they represent every single year. We know that many people and groups approach council directly without ever considering the impact, workload, and already established direction on city administration. It's for this reason that we're here today. Our association would like to know how best we can work alongside both council as well as administration to ensure that the Fort continues to be a vibrant and growing community in which to call home. The reason we asked to be here is to share a little bit about ourselves. We don't have a traditional ask for council. We don't want money. We don't want land. We don't want grants. Our only ask is to both council and to administration is to let us know how we can formally work alongside all of you to help you support or to help support the growth of Fort Saskatchewan. The 2021 Fort Sask Municipal Development Plan outlines within its vision, there's a note within its key community direction statement, and that statement specifically that I'm referring to states to provide a great quality of life within our neighborhoods where everyone can grow, age, and stay. And this is where we know that our association can help support council and administration moving forward. One of our focuses is obviously to work with municipalities to make the right housing supply decisions for its community and to ensure that housing remains attainable for current and future residents here. So we'd like to share a little bit about our focus from an advocacy perspective, just so you can see what we've been working on, and I'll pass it on to Melissa to articulate those.
So thank you again for having us. Federally, we're working alongside our partners, so CREA, the Canadian Real Estate Association. We're advocating for the government to establish a permanent housing roundtable that kind of is like a task force to bring together all stakeholders in the housing sphere to help address challenges that would help go towards an inclusive, holistic, and innovative approach. And this is about finding hyper-local solution for housing needs. Obviously, what's needed here is very different than maybe Edmonton, or maybe even different from our friends in Ontario, so being able to work locally for a solution.
One of the other recommendations that we're working on with the federal government, which ties into municipalities, is tying in infrastructure dollars. So basically setting up a bilateral infrastructure agreement with the province. So, and the focus of this, which ties in with municipalities, is to look at solutions in regards to revising zoning bylaws, speeding up planning and approval processes within municipalities, ways to convert distressed properties, but also to provide infrastructure at the right place and at the right time. So while these federal advocacy positions deal with the provincial government, there is kind of obviously an impact on municipalities.
And then our final recommendation that we're kind of advocating for is a redesign of the prohibition on the purchase of foreign buyers. So you probably heard about the foreign buyer ban. CREA is advocating for it to only target speculators. So it would avoid unattended and negative consequences. Going back to Canada's roots as a multicultural nation, which welcomes people from around the world, we have concerns about the effectiveness of a ban on foreign buyers and the potential for unintended consequences across the Canadian housing market. The federal government's intent of the foreign buyers ban was to crack down on any speculators that may drive up housing prices. However, across the nation, we are seeing that the regulation of the ban has instead de-incentivized foreign workers and international students who are essential to Canadians' growing economy.
So those are our federal positions, and again, those are really more specific. There's a tie in from a municipal perspective. We're also working alongside the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board, and so we're strongly encouraging the EMRB to kind of resume the housing symposium that they used to do pre-2016-17 to reestablish that. So again, to bring key stakeholders together to kind of find very specific hyper-local solutions to housing needs within local areas and districts. We're also encouraging EMRB to undertake a regional housing needs assessment in order to determine regional housing needs for the next 10 to 15 years, because there's no set boundary between a lot of these municipalities. Somebody will live in Leduc but work in Edmonton, so there isn't a hard wall there. So the idea was, let's all work together to find some regional solutions that make total sense. The other thing that we've been pushing on recently is working with the CAOs, so the chief administrative officers within those municipalities that are part of EMRB. And so recently we sent off a letter through EMRB to all the CAOs, and one of the things that we did, and the reason why we did this, is we had a really specific question. One of the things that we're hearing from a lot of municipalities is that while there is funds available for municipalities to build appropriate supply within their municipality, they're having a challenge in obtaining the money from CMHC. So we had some specific questions sent off to all the CAOs to basically ask, are you trying to get money from the CMHC? Which programs are you trying to get money from? What are the hiccups that you're finding in the roadblocks? And what are some potential solutions? And so the idea behind here is to work with the CAOs so that we can advocate on behalf of the municipalities to be able to restructure the CMHC process to make it easier for municipalities to be able to obtain the funding that they're looking for.
Right. Another aspect that we wanted to share with you, in 2022, both the City of Edmonton and the City of Calgary proclaimed December 10th as a day of shelter. This date was specially chosen with the UN deeming housing as a human right on December 10th, 1948. The intention behind this initiative is to bring awareness of the benefits of having a place to call home, from low income to actual market attainable homes. Finally, our industry to actually be able to tangibly place someone in a home, so maybe an individual, a young couple, or a family in their own home, whether they own or rent, everyone deserves a place to stay.
Before I get to a couple questions, if that's okay with council, one of the things that I hope you guys hear from what we're trying to say here is that a lot of the stuff that we're working for isn't about Raheem and Melissa. It isn't about today. It's about that future generation. I understand that Fort Sask is looking to grow to about 50,000 residents. It's about those individuals that will be either moving into Fort Sask or that next generation. So a lot of our asks aren't even about our membership today. So I hope you do hear that in what we're trying to advocate for. If I may, and I'm not sure if this is the norm, but I'd like to ask council maybe a couple questions. Would that be okay, Mayor? Or at least pose a couple questions that maybe somebody could get back to me with? Is that,
Yes,
that's okay?
that would be fine.
First question is, how can we formally work alongside council and administration? That is absolutely critical to us to be able to support all of you to make appropriate decisions on supply in order to ensure that housing is attainable. And as you can see, I'm not saying the word just affordable, but I'm talking about attainable, and that means across the entire spectrum of housing. So that would be question number one. And question number two would be, it goes back to the CMHC. If administration and council here are reaching out to CMHC and trying to get funds or grants, if you would please be willing to work alongside us so we can advocate on your behalf with CMHC, and we'll do that with our 175,000 members across Canada. So I do have commitment from our national association. This is on our radar to deal with. I recently just had a meeting with the federal minister's office. Actually, that was yesterday, which I raised this as a concern. And so one of the things that the federal minister's office is looking for is where are the issues and what are some potential solutions that municipalities can come up with so that they can amend some of these issues within CMHC. And that would be our presentation and our questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will open it up to council for questions, and pretty well questions only, please. So as some of them are maybe formulating their questions, I'll ask the first one. So when you're talking about housing and you're talking about market attainable, what does that look like to you?
Right now, the average selling price of a home within our region is about $500,000 for a single-family home. Single-family home at that price point, you're not going to get a lot of single individuals or young couples or young families being able to obtain that. So we're looking at the appropriate type of supply that will ensure that housing. So when we talk about attainability, it's the fact that an individual on the market side of the housing spectrum can actually obtain that home, and so that's what we're talking about: cost price of the home.
Okay, so then the second question that comes out of that is, what is the appropriate type of supply? So what are you seeing? Like, I want to peel this onion back a bit about, you're asking, attainable, appropriate supply. So help council understand what type of supply is going to make it attainable.
So for us especially, we want to look towards building the missing middle of housing. So maybe it's not that huge dream home with the triple car garage and the walkout basement. Not everyone can afford that. But being able to get someone into like maybe a starter home, maybe a half duplex or something like that, so they can get into the market, build their equity, and then maybe move up to the next level. Or maybe they're happy in the half duplex as well. There's nothing wrong with that. So being able to have a middle ground for people to get into the housing market is a good place to start.
If I can build upon that, one of the things that I'm hearing in regards to Fort Saskatchewan, and keeping politics out of this, but just commentary, zero lot lines. My understanding is that when council had approved zero lot lines as properties here, I was told that they sold pretty darn quickly here. However, for example, my understanding is that the zoning has been changed in some way so that there isn't zero lot lines. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm saying that there seems to be a supply desire here. If consumers can't buy it here, they're going to go to the next neighborhood. That's just how they work. So that the right type of supply, when we take a look at the numbers that we have, so for example, detached are obviously selling at the most here within the Fort Saskatchewan. And then the next one is semi-detached homes, and the third is row townhouses. Now that could just be simply because of the fact that you have much more detached than you do of the other kind. So, I mean, in regards to the supply piece specific within Fort Saskatchewan, I mean, we can look into that and see what's actually selling and how fast they're selling and what the demand is, and we can get back to you on that type of, with more specific information if you like.
Okay, great. Councillor Blizzard, some questions?
One of the things with affordable housing, I think, is you probably have more control of that than I do. There's a supply when the house is being built. I don't have a control of that. I don't even have a say on what the lot prices is. But anyway, you talk a lot about the housing. What about the selling houses, people being able to afford? There are a vast number of people that just want to rent, and there's issues with their rental market, having it affordable. Are you trying to do anything with that? Do you work with that?
Councillor, so are you talking about in regards to rental properties itself?
Rentals in general, the way you were talking, and I know you briefly mentioned rentals, but it's kind of like everyone's goal is to buy a house. I don't believe that.
And I would agree with you there. Not everybody's desire is to actually be a homeowner, but for those, we want to make sure that they can actually obtain that type of home if that's their desire. What we are noticing in regards to rentals, and this is across Canada, it's they're getting more expensive by far. and pretty darn quickly. But again, that's a supply issue of the type of rental that people want to buy. And so I don't know, to be very honest with you, what your rental market here is right now. I'm willing to go back and take a look and do an analysis with some other smarter economists than I am. But we are noticing across the spectrum that rent is going up. And again, part of it is just the fact that people can't get into their first home. So instead of getting into their first home, they're getting into rentals. And again, now you're seeing a huge demand for rentals and low supply of places to rent, so prices just go up.
Right. Yeah. The other thing is, when people buy a home, a big cost in whether it's buying or selling, either way you pay, is the realtor fee. As the prices go up, that number jumps quite a bit too. Is there anything that the Realtor Association is working on to try and mitigate that a little bit? Because that would help too.
Well, my background's in law, so one of the things I'll say is that from a legal perspective, there's the Anti-Competition Act that we can't, as an association, we can't deal with. Generally speaking, my understanding is that each realtor, each brokerage sets their own commission rate, which can be negotiated with the consumer as well. And I do know that there are, we have, don't hold me to this number, but I want to say, let's say 300 different brokerages within our geographical scope. Some of them have the same commission rate, some have different, and it really depends on what the consumer is looking for. They can find that through the brokerages, but they could also speak to the realtor and say, "Can you cut me a deal, or can you help me with this or that?" So something that they can do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions? Just give our online ones a second. Not seeing any. All right, well, I'd like to thank you very much for coming out this evening. I think it's very important that we hear from the Real Estate Association periodically to find out what you're doing and how it aligns with what the communities are doing. And I think that would be some good information to get back to us on what type of housing, is being sought after. I think that's good information for our people who are planning, and I assume you work with the developers as well on that. So greatly appreciate your time this evening, and you're not required to stay. You can leave if you like. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move right along to the item 6.1, revised financial reserves policy. Jeremy Eman presenting.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Jeremy Eman, Chief Financial Officer for the City. I'm here to present Council with Administration's report on proposed revisions to the Financial Reserves Policy, FIN 21-C, and to request that the Council adopt the policy as amended. The Financial Reserves Policy has previously been approved by Council on 2 occasions, originally in 2017 and again in 2019 with revisions. This past February, Administration completed its review of the policy and presented its proposed revisions to Committee of the Whole on February 21st for information and to obtain feedback. Based on the feedback received, a table summarizing the proposed policy revisions has been included in the Council report for today's meeting. No further revisions were made to the policy. In addition to some minor wording and administrative changes, proposed policy revisions include 2 new financial reserves, the Municipal Operating Projects Reserve and the Utilities Operating Projects Reserve, cancellation of the Transportation Assistance Reserve, and changes to the optimal balance formulas for both the Capital Projects Reserve and the Perpetual Care Reserve. The revised financial reserves policy will guide development and reporting of future operating and capital budgets, 3-year operating financial plan forecasts, along with the City's 10-year capital plan and the interim and annual management and financial reports. Implementing the proposed policy revisions will require minimal staff training and should not require any significant additional resources. It is Administration's recommendation that Council adopt revised financial reserves policy FIN 021-C, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will open it up for clarifying questions. Okay, there doesn't appear to be any. Not seeing any. Oh, There we are. Okay, Councillor Kelly. Slight delay there.
That's fine. Part of the delay was mine, Mayor Catcher. I didn't expect it to go that quickly. Jeremy, I'd like to refer you to the Capital Projects Reserve. I'm looking specifically at, I think there doesn't matter where you look, but I'm going to look at the red line version provided to council, if I can I'll find it again. And it's page 13 out of 45 of that particular attachment. There's a reference in there under the funding that would, and I'm trusting my memory here, that the funding will include an annual amount equal to retired debt servicing payments. First of all, is my memory correct? And secondly, please explain that.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, yes, even in the clean copy version that I'm looking at, it's item number 3, sources of funding, allocation equal to retired debt servicing costs. That is in the new iteration of the policy and as well as the old iteration. It basically mirrors the wording that's in our debt management policy, that any retired debt would be redistributed or just referred to as replenishing this capital projects reserve to put funds away for future capital projects.
But this is a new addition to the reserves policy, is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, no, it's not. It mirrors the same wording as the old policy.
So, and this is where I'm kind of struggling, Jeremy. Council had some feedback some time ago from concerned citizens, and I'm not saying they were right, but I'd like to flesh this out a little bit. Concerned citizens expressing a concern about the debenture payment for the Dow building, which I think expires in calendar 23, that payment would not come off of the annual budget for the city, but in fact would carry forward. So that's the intent of this particular wording, that for instance, the debt payment or the debenture payment for the Dow building will continue to form a part of subsequent years' budgets.
Through your worship, Councillor Kelly, that is if that is the wish of council, that would be how it's worded. Yes.
And that would continue indefinitely. So 50 years down the road, there would be a blanket addition for the 50-year-old Dow debt retirement or debt debenture payment?
Through your worship, that's correct.
All right, I'm going to think about that. And Mayor Catcher, I do have more questions. Is there anybody else on the board, or should I continue to speak?
There's nobody yet. I'll let you know when somebody weighs in or wants to speak, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Bear with me as I scroll through this thing. I'll refer to my notes. Jeremy, I have a general concern, and I want to stress that I'm not being negative here. I understand, I think, the complexity of this task and what you were challenged to accomplish. But I have concerns with some of the reserves, such as the Capital Projects Reserve, where the funding model is based upon the last 5 years' budget, but the spending model, in other words, what that reserve is expected to facilitate, is future oriented and in fact references the 10-year capital plan. So help me understand, please, the logic in using history to fund what we plan on spending in the future, and by way of formula as well. So there doesn't appear to be a lot of discretion in the application of that.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, so the way the optimal balance for the Capital Projects Reserve would work prior to this revision was it was based on the 10-year capital plan. The first 5 years, in terms of planning those capital projects that were to be funded through the capital projects reserve. So that's completely forward-looking, and one of the, I guess, negative aspects of that particular optimal balance formula was that when the capital projects, or sorry, when the 10-year capital plan is revised, we need to go back and constantly revise those 5-year optimal balance. So based on our review of financial reserve policies for other municipalities and what's generally considered best practice was to look back at historically in terms of what the capital projects reserve actually funded capital projects within the 10-year capital plan, and applying that percentage then on a go-forward basis for the first 5 years of that 10-year capital plan. So it's not, it's based on historical actual use of that capital projects reserve. So there's a bit more a basis of history, if you will, in applying it on a go-forward basis, if that makes sense.
Well, I thank you for the explanation. I don't think I understand yet. You're using the last 5 years to set the funding or to set the optimal balance, one of the two, I'm not sure which. Wouldn't it make sense to set the optimal balance based upon what we see coming at us in the 10-year capital plan?
So, through your worship to Councillor Kelly, so it is because it is applying it to the first 5 years of the 10-year capital plan. Total projects. So what it's saying is, what percentage did the capital projects reserve actually fund capital projects within the 10-year capital plan based on the last 5 years? So say that percentage was 20% of actual use. So then it applies 20% to the first 5 years of the plan and says, of those total projects, 20% will be funded through the capital projects reserve. So it takes away the component of just mere planning for what you plan to spend in those 5 years to based on what you've actually done in the past.
So in your mind, Jeremy, then the current formula will accommodate, I think it's year 26 in the 10-year capital plan, where capital spending jumps to $60 million. Again, trusting my memory. Is it your opinion then that, number one, the current funding, looking at the average of the last 5 years, will in fact accommodate that? And number two, assuming we keep the same model subsequent to 26, how is that formula calculated? Will that be adjusted for the bump into spending in calendar 26?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, yes, the short answer is yes. Obviously, we have to review this optimal balance on an annual basis as the 10-year capital plan gets revised and as years get added to the 10 years. But what we have as our understanding is that we're going to be basing it on actual use of that capital projects reserve and not just simply what we plan on spending. So there will be a calculated use of data in terms of determining what we plan to spend, as opposed to what we're doing now, which is based on what we feel we're going to spend, if that makes sense.
Well, it does help. Thank you, Jeremy. And I stress, I understand the complexity, or at least I think I do. Because I haven't been interrupted, I'll continue with one more line of questioning. I get the feeling when I look at this, Jeremy, that perhaps 20 reserves is overkill. I don't know why, for instance, we would try to reserve the annual. We have an annual cycle now in our city of replacing, for instance, desktops or laptop computers. They have a 4 or 5 year lifespan. I don't know what it is in our city, but whatever it is, they cycle on that rotation. So why would we try to reserve for something that is essentially an operating expense? Every year we spend $200,000, for instance, or for example, on laptops. Why would we try to reserve something like that?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly. So my understanding of the question is why would we fund operational items through reserves? Is that correct?
Precisely. And the example would be laptops or other what I would consider essentially consumable items in today's world.
So through worship to Councillor Kelly, so the basic idea with having an operating projects reserve as opposed to funding these types of one-time items through tax or utility rates, depending on which fund we're using, would be essentially to give assurance to taxpayers and to utility ratepayers that in any given year when we have a high number of one-time projects that the rates will be kept consistent because we've set aside funds in our reserves to provide for those blips, if you will, in one-time spending. So I think from a reserve standpoint, from a taxpayer and utility rate standpoint, I think it's essential to have these types of reserves to fund these types of one-time projects because it will not cause significant fluctuations from one year to the next, given the number of projects that council decides to approve.
Okay, one last, probably unrelated question, Jeremy. Do we have an ETA on the report that's going to talk, among other things, the neighborhood revitalization program and the potential budget impacts of that program? In other words, I think it was built into part of our capital asset management review.
Through your worship, but if I could, I'd defer that to Mr. Fleming or Mr. Janelle.
Through your worship, I'll actually defer the question to Ms. Smith. The neighborhood rehab work was a separate body of work, though.
Okay.
I'll defer to Ms. Duguid-Smith for the timeline.
Through your worship, our hope is that it will come before council before the summer break. It is with the consultants right now and under preparation.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. I noticed that, and I don't dispute what Jeremy says about reserving to smooth out the tax impact, but I wonder at the logic where we reserve for computers, but we don't reserve for the significant infrastructure within the city. So I'll leave that discussion till we get that report, and maybe we get into capital assets a little bit more. Mayor Katcher, I'm good. I'm going to have, I'll just give you a heads up, a notice of motion or a motion when this gets on the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just before I go to Councillor Nguyen, can you just point out, I keep looking at this document, I've read it over and I cannot see that debt, about the debt servicing on here. Can you point out exactly what section?
Certainly, to your worship. So I'm looking at page 11 of 26 within the within the financial reserve policy itself, under capital projects reserve. And it's point number 3 under source of funding.
Second.
Appendix B, yes. What page? Well, on my page, it's 11 of 26, bottom right-hand corner.
Just a second, I'd just like to take a look at that. I've looked at this and looked at this.
You got it? You're on C. Look at Appendix B. It's on B. And then it's page 11, you said. 10. One more. Here, 8, 9, 10. Should be right here, up a little. There.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a second. Okay, well, I'm just taking a look at that. I'll go to Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. Just for clarification, the Utilities Operating Projects Reserve, that's a new reserve created with a division of the department, right? Like that's solely what prompted the creation of that reserve?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen. So what prompted it was the same line of thinking with the Municipal Operating Projects Reserve, which is funded through tax dollars. We'd have a similar one that's funded through utility rates.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Okay, I'm still reading 11. I don't know if I'm missing something on there. On page 11 on Appendix B, it's Capital Projects Reserve.
Yeah, to your worship. So under source of funding, bullet point 3.
Okay, there it is. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry, I just missed that. All right. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions. I'll have some comments once a motion is on the floor or amending motion. Once the motion is on, what is the wish of council? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Blizzard.
I make a motion that council adopt revised financial reserves policy FIN-021-C.
All right, thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I don't have any big issues with this. I think that we need to have these reserves in place for future monetary needs so that we don't end up running out and all of a sudden having a big expense that we didn't reckon with.
Okay, thank you. It's open for discussion and debate. I'm going to wait and hear what the motion, is it an amending motion, Councillor Kelly, that you have on this?
Yes, it will be to simply remove the item we just talked about.
Okay, so I will take that amending motion.
Right now?
Yeah, we're into discussion, debate, and that amending motion.
That's absolutely fine. I thought you said you were going to proceed a little while or let some comments happen first. I'm
There's
good with that.
nobody in comments.
Okay, fair enough. In that case, then I move an amendment to the policy, in particular under Capital Projects Reserve, source of funding, bracket 3 be deleted in its entirety.
All right, thank you. I'll let, Ms. Exley is drafting that up. I will let you speak to that motion.
I have strong concerns when a budget includes historical expense lines, budgeted amounts that have no relevance in the current time frame. So, and I use this just for an example and nothing more. If in fact council gets to the point in the next few years where a new swimming pool is approved, and let's say, for example, that pool is $50 million, the annual debenture cost could perhaps be $4 million a year. This is strictly by way of example. The taxpayers have a right to believe and understand that when they vote for the pool, that the $4 million expense will end 20 years down the road and not continue as part of the annual budget by being lumped into an ongoing reserve once year 21 hits and indefinitely into the future. I think we set each budget based upon what we need, not based upon, perhaps the perception could be what we can get. And I have strong reservations about this particular line. The debenture was put in place for a specific purpose. It is done. We now move on to budgeting for planned maintenance and operations as we see fit and as necessary going down the road. It's just that simple. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the amending motion is open for discussion and debate. Councillor Abatoye. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I have a question for you, Jeremy. What kind of impact does this have on our budget if this is taken out?
Through worship to Councillor Abatoya. So, as Councillor Kelly, I think, alluded to, that this particular debenture ends the end of December 2023. So no impact to the 2023 budget. For future budgets, then that ongoing payment would no longer be ongoing, and it would just simply come off of the annual outlays.
Right. So, but what does that do for us for planning for the future?
It would through Councillor or through the worship to Councillor Abatoya, it would basically result in I think it's 1.1 million adjustment to the budget for 2024. If it wasn't going to the reserve, it would be available to either reduce taxes or fund some other operational item.
Well, I like the sound of that, and so I support it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. This makes a great deal of sense to me to remove a debenture payment completely out of budget that we're not that is not being put towards the intent of that payment any longer. So, just for clarification on the last comment that you made, so this debt management policy would actually move the debenture payment into operating? No, that's not correct, though, is it? It keeps it in the capital reserve fund.
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, so both the financial reserve policy and the debt management policy mentions that as a suggestion. It's a suggestion. Council again can do with that debenture payment as it sees fit. It's simply there as a way to keep ongoing monies ongoing and put aside to reserves to fund future capital projects in this case.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that, and I will support the motion.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, second. I'm next on the list, so I'm actually going to support this motion as well. I didn't read that in there. There's so many pages to read, and online some of them are really hard to see, I'll be honest. That's why I like my paper copies, because with my reading glasses, it's much easier to read. I have to absolutely agree. I think when a debenture retires, that's a commitment that is done. So I think that those have to be put either back into the budget, or if there's other projects that are coming up, then they're going to, we look at each project on its own merit. So I'm hoping we haven't been doing that with any of the smaller ones that have retired. And I'm sure hoping the answer is no on that.
To your worship, I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Okay, well, that's good news. So I absolutely support this, because I think each one has to be done on its own merit. So, Councillor Blizzard?
Yeah, I'm going to support this too. I think, when you finish a mortgage and you have your mortgage burning party, I kind of feel the same way with this. We've built the Dow Centennial Center. We paid for it for a long time. I'm not against saving. Like with a mortgage, I've advised my kids, when you pay something off, maybe put it towards something else, but that should be open and transparent. We're always saying that with council, with the city, we should be open and transparent. If we do want to do that, then in the fall, we add it in a different way and let people know future facilities. We still want some of that money, even if it's only part of it. But I think it's a good idea to let this go and have it brought back if we need it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris? Whoops.
I will also support the proposed amendment. I think Councillor Kelly was bang on bringing it forward. I happen to be around when we actually approved the Dow budget back a number of years ago, and there was no discussion at that point in time that there would be a prolonged continuation of any sort of a contribution to future projects. I think ultimately it's incumbent on this council and future councils to ensure that we have a well thought out capital budget for the long term, and that we do enough financial analysis as to what that capital budget could mean in any given period of time. Because obviously smart debt would obviously suggest that you want to use debt wisely to fund projects that ultimately contribute to the overall good in our community. And I think that our capital budget plan in the past has been quite well thought out, and it is consistent with good planning going forward. So I think taking this particular element out of the draft or out of the policy makes sense. Future councils can ultimately look at what they need from a financial requirements standpoint, and against the overall needs for capital projects for our growing community. Ultimately, those future councils will have that responsibility to undertake. So I'll support the amendment on that basis.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly, on close. Anything?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the support and the comments. I just point out that the $1 million for coming off the budget for calendar year 24 represents approximately a 2% amount on our property tax bill every year. So we start next year, all things being equal, with a $1 million savings under our belt to move into 24 with. So I think it's fair and reasonable. And Mayor Katcher, I think we have consensus. So call the question, please.
Okay, I just need Ms. Exley to put it up for us first. There we are. That revised policy be amended by deleting capital section 3 in its entirety. Just
Quite correct, I don't think. Hang on.
whoops. Can you put, whoops, just a second.
I think, Mayor Katcher, it should say sources of, under the heading sources of funding.
Ms. Exley, can you add that?
Source of funding, the line item bracket 3. Or 3 bracket.
Yeah, Councillor Kelly, can I just get you to read out the complete motion as you want it, please?
Oh gosh, oh, just a second. Okay, I move that revised cap financial reserves policy FIN 021C be amended by deleting from the capital projects reserves the line item 3 bracket under sources of funding. I'm trusting council and Ms. Exley to tell me if that makes sense.
Yep. Just give her a second. I like my paper copies. I'm going to. Okay. All right, that the revised financial reserves policy FIN-021C be amended by deleting capital projects reserve the line item 3 under the source of funding in its entirety. I think that'll capture it.
Mr. Fleming, do we understand?
By deleting source of funding.
It might make sense.
Through your worship, I think it works. We know the intent. We're
Yeah,
taking out number 3 under the source of funding category under capital projects reserves.
It does say that.
Way,
okay.
If we worded it that way, I'd be happy. Thank you.
It says deleting capital projects reserve the line item number 3, and that's specific to that one that we have in there, the one that I was looking at. Just remove the out of there by deleting capital projects reserve line item 3.
Well, source of funding. It's right there. You could put the capital projects reserve at the end. Just move it to the end.
Or move capital projects reserve to the end. The source of funding line item 3 in the capital reserves. Do you have a question?
I put my light on for a reason. And that's to make a statement that ultimately we're just deleting one line under that capital projects reserve. We're not deleting that capital projects reserve. The way it was written, we're getting rid of that.
Yeah, that's correct. And they're working that out. All right, let's take a look at it now. Read it out. That the revised financial reserves policy be amended by deleting line item 3 under the source of funding under the capital projects reserve. We're good. Okay, close. You're good with that, Councillor Kelly?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so the motion is now closed. Please cast your vote on the amending motion. That is carried unanimously. So now we'll go back to the main motion. If there's any further discussion and debate on the main motion. And the main motion will be as amended. Not seeing any further discussion. The motion on. Councillor Blizzard, anything on close? You're good on close, so the motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Eamon. All right, 7.1 was approved under consent agenda. Are there any notice of motions? Not seeing any. Are there any points of interest? Not seeing any. Are there any councillor inquiries to administration? Not seeing any, then I will take a motion to go into in camera as for intergovernmental affairs under FOIP section 21.1. Councillor Nguyen.
And I move that council enter in camera for matters under FOIP.
All right, thank you very much. I will close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimously. So we now will move into in camera. Thank you very much. And thank you for everybody who has joined us here today.